Hi guys, and welcome to Terminal Velocity. Today is the first episode of the Year in Gaming series. Basically, what I'm going to do in this series is take a year in gaming and talk about what happened. Although for the first episode, I'm going to be doing mini years, as the games in this time period are a lot more stretched out. This starts from the first video game, Tennis for Two, in 1958 all the way to 1985. So while there were many games, including Tennis for Two, Pong, and Space Wars that were among the earliest games, Pong is the first the first home console that was widely marketed, and as well as ColecoVision and Magnavox Odyssey being close behind, as well as the Atari 2600 later. However, arcade games were far more popular, as they allowed different, a lot higher quality games, including like Galaga, Pac-Man, and things like this. There are also a couple RPGs, not very many, like the earliest kinds. And this right here, Star Trek Phaser, is the first portable marketed game for the Coleco Telstar. There were these years also showed the rise in companies such as Sega and Nintendo and Capcom. With the NES and the NES later at the end, and the Master System for Sega. However, most companies around this time made arcade games. Well, there are a lot of good arcade games and home console games from the Atari 2600 and ColecoVision and Master System type consoles are more popular, despite being far graphically not as powerful. With some by the end of this time, 16-bit technology already getting to arcade games. This is because the arcade games, you would have to go to an arcade to play them, and the home ones you can just play at home and buy them at a store. This got games such as Space Invaders and Pitfall and a few other games very popular because of the convenience to play it at home instead of having to go to an arcade. Some of the best games from this time period include Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Galaga, and a lot of the other arcade classics, as well as some games such as Adventure from 1980. Although it isn't a very great looking game, it's the first adventure puzzle game, which is pretty cool, as well as Tempest and Pitfall and Pole Position, Xevious. There are a lot of really good games out there from this time. And the best consoles would probably consist of the Atari 2600, Sega Master System, the Famicom or Nintendo Entertainment System, as well as ColecoVision. Now, the very first game, Tennis for Two, was made in 1958, and on some of the early computers. And there were basically no video games made until Space Wars in 1962. There wouldn't be many games for about 10 years after this, however, and until Pong was released by Atari publishers in 1972 and was the first mass sold video game. And it came by itself, but it was a home video game that you could play on your TV. And later, some other competitors such as Magnavox Odyssey and ColecoVision started making consoles where you could play more than one game on it. And then Atari came back with the Atari 2600, making games such as I mentioned earlier, like Pitfall, Yar's Revenge, uh, and a few other games. Um, but they didn't really get widely popular until the around 1979 was sort of when video games started to get pretty popular. Um, and then in 1982, Atari made E.T. the video game, which caused the video game crash of 1983, which is where video games became, or at least home video games, became very unpopular for a while because of just how bad E.T. the video game was. And it wasn't necessarily that the game was bad. It was very rushed, and it was like impossible to make a good game. They only had like 2 months to make it, which is no time at all. But then, game companies such as Nintendo and Sega started making the Master System and the NES. And in 1985, with the release of Super Mario Bros. For the NES, also the Famicom disk system in Japan, made video games very popular again. In fact, it made them more popular than before the crash of 1983. Also, around this time, in 1984, a game called Tetris came out, which still to this day is the second best-selling video game of all time, after Minecraft. It's a block game where you match the puzzles, and it was very popular, and still is today. Also, games such as Ice Climbers and Ghosts and Goblins came out around the same time as Mario Bros. And just added even more to the NES's popularity. And Sega's Master System remained in relative obscurity until around until they came out with the Sega Genesis, which would not happen in this time period. But overall, there were a lot of good things and bad things in the video game industry in these years, and all of them are important to video game history. Anyways, this also marked the beginning of portable consoles and games where you could take them on the go. The first example of this was, I believe, the Coleco Telstar in 1979. Which was very low quality. I mean, it wasn't low quality. It wasn't very good looking games, though, as you might have imagined for being the first handheld console. It was only 16 by 16, and it didn't have too much games to offer. But the idea itself was very remarkable, as you could play video games wherever you were, as long as you had like enough batteries, which is very cool to play them in the car or away from home. Yeah, and this is most of the major stuff that happened in video game industry in between the years 1958 and 1985. I hope you liked this video. It's more informative than some of my other videos, but I still hope you enjoyed it. And the next videos in this series are only going to cover 1 year at a time, so they'll have a lot more specific detail. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe and watch some of my other videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.